Hello everyone, welcome back to round 3 of Maia Chess Open. I just finished my game a couple of hours back, but feels like I just finished it, and it was quite a tense game. So let me show you what happened. I faced Grandmaster Victor Mikhalevski from Israel, and I started with the move e4. Now my opponent plays a lot of different openings. This is very common with Grandmasters, especially when they've played for so long. They are always ready with different openings. They play an opening they've never played before, or at least not in a classical tournament, and you can expect anything. But I did try my best to prepare against everything that my opponent played recently and what was most likely going to happen. And before I continue, I would like to share with you that I have launched a Patreon, so make sure to check out the link below in the description, because on my Patreon I am sharing a lot of behind the scenes stuff for my tournaments, for my chess improvement journey, and I want to share travel vlogs and all sorts of different things. And I also want to share this with you. So in today's post, actually my very first post on Patreon, I have shared my preparation that I had against my opponent today. Well, I basically shared the notes that I made, which was going over all the lines that my opponent plays and what I would respond to it and everything. So if you want to see my notes, how it is like to prepare against a GM, make sure to check out my Patreon and consider subscribing. Now, it feels like I did an advertisement of some sponsorship, but it's just my own Patreon. Okay, that was the aircon. I don't know why it's complaining, but anyway, let's get back to the game. Let's see what happened, because my opponent plays move e5, c5 mostly. And then there's like small differences here and there, small sidelines that my opponent plays. So I had to look into many different things, but my opponent went for the move c5. Knight f3, d6. I actually thought my opponent would not go for this because I have so many different moves that I play against the knight erf, but perhaps because of the fact that I play so many different moves, maybe that's also a weakness, because it shows that I don't know what I'm doing. Which is maybe oftentimes the case, but I'd like to believe that I know at least something about openings, alright? Anyway, d4, c takes c4, knight takes d4, knight f6, knight c3, a6. So the knight erf was on the board, and here I prepared to move bishop c4. This bishop c4 line, I do have to say this is quite new to me. I'm more of an attacking player. I'm used to just throwing all the pawns on the king side, and I'm very ambitious with the pawn pushes. So bishop c4 is more of a solid approach most of the times. My opponent went for a6. I saw my opponent play move b5 in a game earlier, and I was ready to play bishop d5 here. I checked this with the computer, and bishop d5 is the best move here, so I was ready to go for that. But instead my opponent went for e6, and here I remembered to move a4 to prevent b5. And after knight c6, here I was already thinking, I remember vaguely that there are lines where I'm supposed to take. Here I just simply start to lose the thread already, because I have just a hard time putting my pieces in the right squares. This bishop on c4 feels misplaced. I'm not used to this. I'm more of a either bishop e2 player or bishop g2, or the bishop goes to d3 to then support a potential attack on the king side. But what is a bishop exactly doing on c4 when it's staring down on the pawn on e6, right? So of course, the idea is still to attack, but then with the f pawn. Sorry, that went wrong. With f4, f5, but that didn't really quite happen. You'll see why. I went for bishop e3. I went for bishop e3, simply developing queen c7. And yeah, I was basically thinking for the longest time, do I take on c6 or not? Now was apparently the moment that it was possible. At least it is the best move to go for knight takes c6 in this very position. But it's hard to decide when to take, right? I mean, right now my bishop is under attack after knight takes d4, right? So it makes sense to take now, although after knight takes c6 I can take back with the queen, it's still possible. But yeah, I thought queen e2, simply defending the bishop on c4 feels quite flexible. Bishop e7, h3. Now I played a move h3 because I was scared of, after short castles, knight e5, my bishop will have to move, and then knight e to g4. I thought it was really annoying. Because the threat is that, okay, first of all, my bishop is under attack. I don't want to trade this bishop. So let's say I retreat, then comes d5. Opening up the queen, threatening checkmate on h2. And I didn't quite like that. Also, once you allow your opponent to play d5 in Sicilian, any Sicilian, it becomes tough. Unless there is a concrete reason why d5 is just bad and losing material on the spot. But if it is not losing material on the spot, it's usually really good for black, and that means that you're probably in trouble with the white, or you're going to be in trouble. So that's why I really did not want to allow d5. Apparently this was still acceptable and I could simply retreat or play g3 to defend, but yeah, I could not possibly imagine that this was fine. So that's why instead I went for the move h3 to prevent this, but it's a little bit of a slow move. My opponent went for short castles, I also short castled, and here my opponent took on d4. Bishop takes d4 and went e5. So this is basically changing the structure completely. My bishop has to retreat, and now bishop e6. And now the question is, what do I do with that bishop on c4? I don't know. I don't know where to put it. Do I just go back? I considered going back to d3. I did not consider going back to a2, admittedly, which turns out to be the best move. But all my eyes were fixed on takes, knight d5, or bishop d5. And if there's one thing that I remember from my previous games where I had a similar type of position, I was told and I was reminded that this d5 square, you need to occupy this. So I was fully focused on controlling that square, and I was debating, do I play knight d5 or bishop d5? And then eventually I went for knight to d5. For the simple reason that I want to try having the pair of bishops, because bishop takes d5 is the most logical move. E takes d5, and at least I had a pair of bishops. Hopefully this comes in handy somehow. Of course, I have no guarantee of this, but yeah, I don't know. It looks really tough to play this with white. You're staring down this pawn on d5, it becomes a weakness, and it's really easy for black to play here. Black has a simpler idea of pushing the f pawn and starting an attack on the king side there. Whereas my plan to attack on the queen side is very slow. So that's why I was already sensing trouble, and especially when you're facing a GM, you already know that this is going to be really difficult because you need to come up with plans. My opponent's plan is very simple. My plan's a little bit sophisticated. Rook a8, simply attacking that bishop on c4, so I have to retreat. Maybe it was possible to play b3 here. My opponent also afterwards told me maybe b3 was a better try to really shut things down. I didn't want to commit to this. I thought maybe there's some b5 type of moves, and if I take on b5, the knight takes d5, the pawn drops on d5, and that's a very important pawn, right? But there is the move rook a7. I did consider this, and yeah, I still wasn't entirely sure. I just really didn't want to lose that pawn on d5. I really thought I have to hold on to that. So that's why I didn't want to play b3. But my opponent did recommend this move, that it was perhaps better to play this. But I went for bishop b3. And here my opponent comes in with knight to e4. And I thought, wow, this is crazy. This is crazy stuff. He is basically maneuvering the knight to c5 to attack my bishop. And I did consider playing the move c3 to then give the bishop space to go to c2, but once again the pawn is coming to f5. I'm not entirely sure about this. I went for a5. If in any case, maybe I get to play bishop b6 at some point, could be very useful. And I didn't like that the pawn was on a4. I wanted to move it forward, basically to create more space for myself. My opponent went for knight c5, bishop c4. Don't really have a choice, right? If I move my bishop to a2, then I lose the pawn on a5. I guess I could have considered rook. I didn't like rook a3 because I would lose that bishop, and yeah, I didn't really know what to think of this because I'm losing one of the pawns, but at the same time I'm winning the pawn back on b7. It's very unclear to me. So I just want to keep the bishop pair, right? So bishop c4, here goes my opponent with f5, and I'm not that much worse yet. but I just know the trouble that is ahead of me, and it's really difficult to defend here, because how do you counter f4, f3? If you play f4 yourself, you're just going to have long-term problems, and it's just very weakening altogether. My opponent couldn't even take. My opponent doesn't even have to do much, because this bishop becomes very active on this diagonal, and then the rook comes to e8. I'm basically stuck with my pieces. My pieces are not able to make any progress, you know? So yeah, rook a3 is a move that I played because I thought, okay, if let's say f4 will be played, I move my bishop back, and then I'm controlling the third rank and hope for the best, you know? So at least I'm stopping any sort of f3 attack. So that's why rook a3, but my opponent played this clever move bishop f6 with the idea to prepare the move e4, right? So that's why I have to be careful about e4, because my pawn b2 will be under attack. So I really wanted to move my bishop because I thought the next move is going to be knight e4, and I have to move my bishop anyway. I cannot move my f pawn right now because this allows my opponent to play knight e4. The bishop is under attack, right? So my bishop has to move, and then the next move my opponent would go knight g3, forking my queen and rook over here. So that's why I cannot touch the f pawn altogether, and for that reason I'm already struggling here. Now here I went for bishop a2, simply hiding that bishop and making sure it will not be attacked. That was also kind of the idea, to play rook a3 so that my rook is out and my bishop is safe on a2, and the pawn on a5 is defended. My opponent went for e4. I saw this coming, but admittedly I did not have anything ready just yet, because if I moved my c pawn either to c3 or c4, then knight to d3, and yeah, it's not a fun position. It's quite a disaster. It's not lost yet according to the engine, but I would say this is practically lost, because it's just so difficult to defend this when this is under attack, this is incoming, and it's basically a slow death, especially against someone as strong as my opponent. They know very well how to take care of this. I mean, maybe against a computer it's a different story, but against a human being, yeah, that's rough. I went for the move b4. I knew exactly what was happening. I knew exactly what I was doing when I played this move. It was a very conscious, deliberate decision. As you can see, bishop b2. My rook is trapped. Now, what to do about this? I saw this. I knew exactly that my rook was trapped on a3, and I had calculated that I'd take on c5. This is what happened. Bishop takes a3, and here I played a clever move c3. And look at that bishop on a3. It's trapped. And also, my opponent cannot take my bishop, because if d takes c5, then d6 check. This bishop gives a check here, and I am threatening to take that queen. So I thought maybe I'm being clever here, because after c3, if I can capture that bishop somehow, maybe it's not so bad. My opponent goes for queen e7. It's a really clever idea, because bishop d4, queen g5. And my opponent is trying to maneuver the bishop back towards the king side, basically. So suddenly bishop c1 is possible. So I play queen d1 to prevent bishop c1. But here comes my opponent with f4. The computer calls it a mistake. I call it painful for me. Because the threat is f3 is incoming, e3 is incoming, everything is incoming. And I'm still not able to win that bishop, because after queen b3, there's simply bishop c1. Because after rook takes c1, my opponent has f3 and I'm getting checkmated. This pawn is under attack, being threatened checkmate here, and the rook is hanging on c1. So that's why f4 was not a fun move to deal with. But in this position, this was move 25, I'm down to 8 minutes and my opponent has 48 minutes. You can tell from this time management that I was suffering so much the entire game, because my opponent was playing so quickly, and no matter how focused I was thinking on my opponent's clock. I was spending a lot of time on my own move, and I was working so hard, trying my best to make the best out of this game, that I was still so low on the clock and in not a great position too. So I really gave it my all this game, but I'm in time trouble. And I started making mistakes. I'm down to 3 minutes now. I play rook a1. Apparently I should have played move f3 to stop things over here, but I couldn't get myself to play the move f3. It's so weakening and I cannot really justify it, but I do have to admit, as soon as I play rook e1, it did hit me that I should have played f3, and I looked disgusted at my board, thinking that, why did I play rook e1? Why did I do this? Or actually, yeah, no, I was thinking maybe this hit me a move later. I think it hit me here that I just have f3 and I can stop f3 altogether, like for the rest of the game, pretty much. I can stop f3 right now. But yeah, I also considered move bishop b1. Like that was my first instinct, bishop b1, to attack the pawn e4. But then I thought e3, it looks very annoying. Turns out that rook e1, an attempt to stop e3, did not help because my pawn went for e3 anyway. Isn't that beautiful? You make a move to try to prevent a move, and that move still happens and is just basically completely crushing you. So yeah, that was not fun. That was not really fun. After spending almost all my time here, I went for queen e3, and now my position is simply collapsing. I guess the final attempt to survive here was again f3, but in this position it's already really bad because my opponent has long-term plans. He showed me that he can simply, let's say, queen g3, he's coming in with the queen, rook e2, and then simply rook c7. And his idea, rook c8, because bishop takes b4 is suddenly a threat. As soon as c takes b4, so let's just make a few random moves, right? Bishop here, rook here, bishop here. The idea is simple. I mean, he can even take on c3, but let's say bishop takes b4, c takes b4, rook c1, and I'm dead on the first rank, completely dead. So, yeah. Basically, the bottom line is my position is horrendous, and that's why even f3 cannot save me here anymore. But I played queen d3, and I was hoping to find a miracle here, but after f3, g3, e2, I mean, look at this. There is no way I'm surviving this. Look at the pawn chain right in front of my king. It's crazy how far these pawns are able to push. It's so crazy. Bishop b1, queen g6. Of course, stopping checkmate, and my opponent of course wants to trade pieces. As soon as the pieces are traded, then my opponent's completely winning, and my rook is stuck on the first rank. So I play queen e3, so the queen is now under attack. Queen e6, my opponent wants to trade, of course, and I play queen e7. My opponent wants to take on h3, but then it would be checkmate now, so that's why I played queen e7. And yeah, of course my opponent did not allow this. My opponent went for bishop c1, simply saving the bishop. Final attempt to looking for a miracle. Bishop takes g7, queen takes g7, queen e6 check, king h8, rook takes c1, queen g6 was not played. That was an error in DGT. So if you saw this game live, well, that did not happen. What did happen though? Class, queen takes g3. I was so proud when I saw this. I was proud for my opponent, you know? I could have resigned already moves before this, but I just enjoyed this for my opponent, that he is able to sacrifice the queen, because after f takes g3, f2 check, that pawn is promoting. I don't have enough pieces anymore. I don't have any threats even, and this is why after f2 I decide to resign. It's a really pretty position, and yeah, my opponent deserves the win. He played really well, and it was also really nice. We were analyzing after the game, and he was so kind and so nice. So yeah, it makes me feel happier that yeah, he had such a good game. He played so well, and yeah, the analysis we had was really awesome after the game. So yeah, it's of course really sad that I lost this game, and I really wanted to give more a bigger fight than this, but I feel like I've tried as much as I could. And I think the bottom line of this game is that because I'm unfamiliar with the ideas in this opening, I think that's where things went downhill, because I start overthinking a lot. I start getting confused. Am I supposed to do this or that? Or like, what are the plans? And I think I confuse it a lot with what I'm used to. And because of that, things just like don't go my way, because essentially it was quite easy, quite natural for my opponent to make the moves that he did. The moves are really natural and my moves were really shaky, you know? So that's why I think things went downhill because of that. Of course, there were some moments that it was equal again. I could fight back, but that's already, you know, seeing the clock situation, it's only a matter of time until things go downhill again. But anyway, it was a really fun game. I feel like I gave it my all, so it gives me, you know, it makes me feel better that I really tried. I really tried, and I'm learning a lot from this game too. So we just continue with the next round, clear-headed, and yeah, we're just going to have a good time, right? So let's see what happens tomorrow. I'm going to get some sleep now. Thanks so much for watching. Thanks for the love and support. I'm gonna do my best tomorrow, and I'll see you in the next recap. Bye!